What's up, guys? I'm here to discuss ID 2020 and how essentially, even though ID 2020 obviously existed long before 2020 and long before 2019, we want to get into how the year 2020 and ID 2020, they were hinting at everything that happened that year. And the reason I want to make these videos, the reason I keep updating, adding more information, is because, I know that someone's going to find this information. Someone's going to make great use of it. As a matter of fact, I've educated a lot of people already, so without further ado, I'm going to expose ID 2020 and how, they had to do with the scamdemic. And I wanted to get into ID 2020 because this is from 2017, and if you really read about what ID 2020 is and digital identity, they're talking about how ID 2020, a public-private partnership dedicated to giving 1/6 of the world's population access to an official, recognized identity. And this is literally straight from scripture. This is biblical because they're talking about women, children in the world's most vulnerable. People don't realize that this is scripture when the Bible talks about the mark of the beast targeting great, small, rich, poor, free, and bond, where it's going to be everybody who's going to be identified by the mark. And this stuff is hard for a lot of people to believe, but if you've known about ID 2020 prior to 2020, the year, and then you saw everything that happened in 2020, you actually know that these agendas are actually happening at a faster pace than we had anticipated. So when we're seeing things like this, where ID 2020 is really dedicated to United Nations and their sustainable development goals, which is another thing I talk about because Sustainable Goal 16.9 is global identity for all. It's universal identity. And what that means is essentially is it's the mark of the beast. Now, it could be a decade or two, could be 100 years before the actual mark of the beast is on the planet, or is at least being enforced, because by the looks of it, it's already on the planet. But most likely, we don't know, because these United Nations, they worship the beast. They have a whole statue of the beast. So it's not a question about why these people are so specific about their goals. It's really a question about when they're preparing for all of this to happen. And to them, it's from the year about 2030 to 2050. And I've even covered United Nations on American Dad, which is, created by the same person who created Family Guy. But United Nations is actually depicted in American Dad, and it's literally shown where the entire world is destroyed, where it looks worse than global warming. And then United Nations, the building is all tore up. It has demonic symbols written on it, and there's niggas being chased around by demons, outside the building. So essentially, what that scene told me was that the people at UN, what they're really doing is they're gonna turn this world into an atmosphere, into a climate for demons. And really, they're gonna do it under the guise of protecting humanity. When in reality, what they're doing is almost like a sick joke. It's almost like a sick prank where they're essentially just mocking you, they're making fun of you, while they're simultaneously summoning demons on the planet. While they're simultaneously talking about depopulation, lowering the population. While they're simultaneously feeding you chemicals, metals, plastics, all of that. And essentially, that's what the UN is. The UN is one of the biggest world organizations of demon worshippers. The United Nations is essentially a world cult. It's a world organization. And they worship the beast. So don't get confused when you see people at UN, when they're laughing at the fact that most people are gonna have to eating synthetic GMO chemical food. They're gonna have to eat 3D printed food once the climate has been destroyed due to the judgments of God. And for those of you who really don't know, the Sustainable Development Goals are meant to protect those who take the mark of the beast for 3.5 years after they persecute all the Christians. The Sustainable Development Goals is literally the blueprint for the pact that the beast is going to form with the world. So when it talks about quote-unquote ending world hunger, they're preparing for the fact that majority of humanity will experience a famine after the Christian persecution, when majority of humanity has taken the mark of the beast, when the only two groups of humans on the planet are those that have been sealed by God or marked by the beast. So these Sustainable Development Goals are for those 3.5 years. And then once the pact is obviously broken and those goals are broken, they can no longer be met. That's when people see the real judgments of God, the true judgments of the Most High that will fall upon the planet.